Good day, everyone, and welcome to another Oklahoma Municipal Assurance Group informational session. Today's session will focus on investigations of unidentified and missing persons. My name is Kevin McCullough, and I'm your OMAG law enforcement specialist, and I'll be your facilitator for today's virtual meeting. And again, welcome. This training is created by the Oklahoma Municipal Assurance Group, and the opinions contained herein are those of the authors. You can learn more about us at www.omag.org. You go to our menu and then click on About Us or Publications, Free Services, or you can explore the I Want To menu. Today's broadcast is a cooperative effort brought to you by the Oklahoma Municipal Assurance Group, the Oklahoma Association of Chiefs of Police, and the Oklahoma Municipal Management Services. You can learn more about OMAG, OACP, and OMMS by visiting our websites omag.org, okchiefs.org, and okmms.org. A little bit of housekeeping when it comes to today's session. This course has been approved by CLEET for 1 hour of continuing education credit. Handouts should be provided by your agency training officer or can be requested via email. Questions can be submitted to me via email at kmccullough@omag.org. I'll have my contact information on the last slide, so it'll be supplied to you at the end of today's session. And now it's time to get into investigations of unidentified and missing persons. In 2019, Oklahoma passed legislation which established a continuing education mandate for Oklahoma peace officers that required training focused on the investigations of unidentified and missing persons. This mandate went into effect November 1, 2019. A missing person whose body was found in Muskogee County in 1983 inspired the legislation known as Francine's Law. Francine Frost disappeared on a February night in 1981 from a grocery store parking lot in Tulsa. There was no evidence found at the scene except for Frost's car keys still hanging from her car door. Her remains were found 2 years later near Martin, Oklahoma, but she remained unidentified till August of 2016. Her death is ruled a homicide. It wasn't until 2014 that Frost's family received closure, even though Frost's body was found in 1983 in Muskogee County. CLEET now requires 1 hour of continuing education on this topic annually. I might mention that at that same time, the Oklahoma legislature passed another continuing education mandate for Oklahoma peace officers, which requires training over policies and protocols for responding to sexual assault calls, guidelines for the collection and maintenance of sexual assault kits, and trauma-informed sexual assault response and intervention. All right, let's cover some definitions that we will be using throughout today's session. At risk, this includes persons who are under the age of 13 or younger, regardless of age, are believed or determined to be experiencing one or more of the following circumstances: out of the zone of safety for his or her chronological age and developmental stage, drug dependent, including prescribed medication and/or illegal substances, and the dependency is potentially life-threatening, mentally or behaviorally disabled, absent from home for more than 24 hours before being reported to law enforcement as missing in a life-threatening situation, in the company of others who could endanger his or her welfare, absent in a way that is inconsistent with established patterns or of behavior and cannot be readily explained. Most children have an established and reasonably predictable routine. Involved in a situation that would cause a reasonable person to conclude the person should be considered at risk, or if they qualify for a state amber alert. Missing person. Missing person is any person who is reported missing to law enforcement when that person's location is unknown. Missing person networks. These are databases or computer networks that are available to law enforcement and are suitable for obtaining information related to missing person investigations. This includes the National Crime Information Center, or NCIC, the Oklahoma Law Enforcement Telecommunications System, or OLETS. An unidentified person includes an unidentified deceased person, a person of any age who are living and unable to determine their identity, and unidentified catastrophe victims. Missing person cases are one of the most often and widely reported calls for law enforcement. We must never consider any report of a missing person to be routine, but we must assume that the missing person is in need of immediate assistance until an investigation reveals otherwise. Priority is given to missing person cases over property-related cases. For years, there has been a misnomer regarding the time frame in which a person can be reported missing. Oklahoma statute prohibits agencies from requiring any delay in the taking of a report of a missing person when reliable information has been provided to the law enforcement agency that a person is missing. That same statute advises that no law enforcement agency shall mandate the appearance of a next of kin before initiating a missing persons investigation. So, officers must initiate an investigation into all reports of missing persons regardless of the length of time the person has been missing. Any peace officer encountering an individual who wishes to report a missing person or runaway should render assistance without delay. This can be accomplished by accepting the report via telephone or in person and initiating the investigation. Officers who are unable to give immediate assistance shall promptly dispatch or alert an officer who can take that report. A report must be accepted in all cases and regardless of where the person was last seen, where the person resides, or any question of jurisdiction. Officers conducting the initial investigation of a missing person should take the following investigative actions as applicable. We respond to a dispatched call as soon as practicable. If the missing person is under 17 years of age, an investigation shall be initiated immediately. And please refer to Title 10 for more information in this area. We should interview the reporting party and any witnesses to determine whether the person qualifies as a missing person, and if so, whether the person may be at risk. We notify a supervisor immediately if there is evidence that a missing person is either at risk or may qualify for a public alert, or both. We broadcast an alert if the person is under 17 years of age or there is evidence that the missing person is at risk. The alert should be broadcast as soon as practicable, but in no event more than 1 hour after determining the missing person is under 17 years of age or may be at risk. Initial investigation actions continued. We ensure that entries are made into the appropriate missing person networks immediately when the missing person is at risk. In all other cases, as soon as practicable, but no later than 2 hours from the time of the initial report. We complete the appropriate report forms accurately and completely and initiate a search as applicable under the facts. We collect and/or review a photograph and fingerprint card of the missing person if available, a voluntarily provided biological sample of the missing person if available, any documents that may assist in the investigation, such as court orders regarding custody. Any other evidence that may assist in the investigation, including personal electronic devices, such as tablets, cell phones, and computers. Initial investigation actions continued. When circumstances permit, and if appropriate, we should attempt to determine the missing person's location through their telecommunications carrier. We contact the appropriate agency if the report relates to a missing person report previously made to another agency, and that agency is actively investigating the report. When this is not practicable, the information should be documented in an appropriate report for transmission to the appropriate agency. If the information relates to an at-risk missing person, the officer should notify a supervisor and proceed with reasonable steps to locate the missing person. We notify the OSBI if there is a reason to believe that a missing person under 18 years of age and who was born in Oklahoma may be the victim of a family abduction. You can find more information on this in Title 74. Let's take a moment here and cover some information regarding at least one missing person network that we are all probably familiar with. So the NCIC's missing person file was implemented in 1975. Records in the missing person file are retained indefinitely until the individual is located or the record is canceled by the entering agency. The missing person file contains records for individuals reported missing who have a proven physical or mental disability, are missing under circumstances indicating that they may be in physical danger, they're missing after a catastrophe, they're missing under circumstances indicating their disappearance may not have been voluntary. They're under the age of 21 and do not meet the above criteria, they are 21 years of age or older and do not meet any of the above criteria, but for whom there is a reasonable concern for their safety. As of December 31st, 2019, NCIC contained over 87,000 active missing person records. The juveniles under the age of 18 accounted for about 35% of those records. 44% of the records were juveniles that were defined as under 21 years of age. During that same year, 2019, there were 609,275 missing person records entered into NCIC. NCIC's unidentified person file came online in 1983. Records in that file are retained indefinitely unless removed by the entering agency. The unidentified person file contains records of unidentified deceased persons, person of any age who are living and unable to determine their identity, and unidentifiable catastrophe victims. As of December 31st, 2019, there were over 8,100 unidentified person records entered into NCIC. During 2019, 683 unidentified person records were entered into NCIC. The records entered in 2019 consisted of 448 deceased unidentified bodies, 9 unidentified catastrophe victims, and 226 living persons who could not ascertain their own identity. Of course, officers should complete all missing person reports and forms promptly and advise the appropriate supervisor as soon as a missing person report is ready for review. Now let's talk about some supervisory responsibilities. The responsibilities of a supervisor would include, but are not limited to, reviewing and approving missing person reports upon receipt, ensuring that the reports are forwarded to the appropriate person or position, such as the Records Bureau, ensuring resources are deployed as appropriate, initiating a command post if available and if needed, ensuring applicable notifications and public alerts are made and documented, ensuring that records have been entered into the appropriate missing person network, taking reasonable steps to identify and address any jurisdictional issues to ensure cooperation among agencies. And if the case falls within the jurisdiction of another agency, the supervisor should facilitate transfer of the case to the agency of jurisdiction. And we'll continue on reporting procedures and routing, but let's focus now on some administrative responsibilities. So the responsibilities of administration or Records Bureau, that whoever receives the information shall, those responsibilities shall include, but are not limited to, as soon as reasonable under the circumstances, notifying and forwarding a copy of the report to the agency of jurisdiction for the missing person's residence in cases where the missing person is a resident of another jurisdiction. Notifying and forwarding a copy of the report to the agency jurisdiction where the missing person was last seen. Notifying and forwarding a copy of the report to the agency of jurisdiction for the missing person's intended or possible destination if known, and then forwarding a copy of the report to the appropriate investigator. Now, in addition to any of the actions that we've talked about already, the investigator assigned to a missing person investigation should ensure that the missing persons school is notified within 10 days if the missing person is a juvenile. The notice shall be in writing and should include a photograph. The investigators should meet with the school officials as appropriate to stress the importance of including the notice in the child's student file along with the investigator's contact information. So if the school receives a call requesting transfer of missing child's files to another school, the investigator can be notified. Should recontact if the reporting party and or witnesses within 30 days of the initial report and within 30 days thereafter to keep them informed as appropriate and to determine if any additional information has become available. Should also consider contacting other agencies involved in the case to determine if any additional information is available. And they should verify and update OLETs, NCIC, and any other applicable missing person networks within 60 days of the original entry into those networks and every 45 days thereafter until the missing person is located. This is investigative follow-up information continued. The follow-up investigators should continue to make reasonable efforts to locate the missing person and document these efforts at least every 45 days. We maintain a close liaison with the missing child network. Also, we make appropriate inquiry of the medical examiner. We obtain and forward medical records, photographs, x-rays, and biological samples as we gather them and as applicable. We attempt to obtain the most recent photograph for a person under 18 years of age if it has not been obtained previously, and we forward those types of photographs to the OSBI. We should also consider making appropriate entries and searches in the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, or NamUs. When any person reported missing is found, the assigned investigator documents the location of the missing person in the appropriate report form. We would notify the relatives and or reporting party as appropriate and those other involved agencies. We refer the case for additional investigation if warranted. The administration should ensure that upon receipt of information that a missing person has been located, the following needs to occur. We notify OSBI. The missing child's school is notified. The entries are made in the applicable missing person networks within 72 hours of location or discovery of the missing person. When a person is at risk, the fact that the person has been found shall be reported within 24 hours to the OSBI. Notification is made to any other law enforcement agency that took the initial report or participated in that investigation. Officers investigating a case of an unidentified person who is deceased or a living person who cannot assist in identifying themselves should obtain a complete description of the person, enter the unidentified person's description into the NCIC unidentified person file, use available resources such as those related to missing persons to identify that person. Case closure of a missing person may be authorized after considering the following. Closure is appropriate when the missing person is confirmed returned or evidence matches an unidentified person or body. If the missing person is a resident of your jurisdiction or your agency is the lead agency, the case should be kept under active investigation for as long as the person may still be alive. Exhaustion of leads in the investigation should not be a reason for closing a case. If your department is not the lead agency, the case can be made inactive if all investigative leads have been exhausted, the lead agency has been notified, and entries are made in the applicable missing person networks as appropriate. A missing person case should not be closed or reclassified because the person would have reached a certain age or adulthood, or because the person is now a subject of a criminal or civil warrant. As each individual missing person situation is unique, the time, effort, depth, and resources committed to the investigation are going to vary widely. Each situation requires the officer and the agency to examine the facts and circumstances and exercise good judgment in determining how the case is pursued. While diligence needs to be exercised in determining if a person meets the missing person criteria, it should be noted that persons over the 21 years of age have the right to be missing if they choose. An individual who does not meet the missing person criteria is a civil matter. Each agency's policy should include guidelines for these types of situations. Now, while we are covering the investigation of unidentified and missing persons, I want to mention another piece of legislation that passed recently. Senate Bill 172 was signed into law in April to help knock down some of the hurdles Native families face when their loved ones are murdered or go missing. The law requires the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation to secure federal funding to establish an Office of Liaison and create a database to keep up with these types of cases. The new law that went into effect on November 1st aims to give the state's Native American families a more coordinated pursuit of justice. Ida's law, named for the mother of four who was 29 years old when she went missing, prompted changes within the state's top law enforcement agency. An agent now tracks and investigates cases of missing and murdered Indigenous Oklahomans. A victim advocate now supports their families. According to family members, Ida Beard was reported missing in late June of 2015. But a local police department did not open an investigation and start searching for Beard, a citizen of the Cheyenne and Arapaho tribes, until 2 weeks later. According to police department spokespersons, Ida's case was opened on July 15th. During that 2-week window, family members started asking friends and neighbors if they had seen Beard. Because crimes against Native Americans often go unreported, the number of cases involving Indigenous Oklahomans is unknown. Recent estimates show that at least 220 Native American Oklahomans are missing. So because of that, there are no accurate counts of missing and murdered Indigenous people, more specifically with women, anywhere in the country, according to a study by the Urban Indian Health Institute. For instance, the study cited over 5,000 reports of missing and murdered Indigenous women as of 2016. Only 116 of those were reported to the Department of Justice. Complicating factors include confusion about whose jurisdiction the missing case falls under, a lack of trust between Indigenous persons and police, and misclassification of the missing person. Families are uncertain whether to report these cases to local police, tribal law enforcement, or federal authorities. Now families can report directly to the state's Office of Liaison for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons within OSBI. The new database required by the law is designed to properly document those who go missing, while the agent acting as liaison will start investigating the cases and meeting with the tribes. Now at this point, we need to take some time to look at federal requirements regarding Native American graves and remains. Law enforcement agencies, especially Oklahoma law enforcement agencies, must adopt policies which ensure the protection and security of ancient or historic grave sites, including notification of personnel responsible for cultural items in compliance with the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. So let's look at some definitions that we need to understand relating to this act. And you can find more information on this in 43 CFR 10.2. When we talk about Native American human remains, this term means the physical remains of the body of a person of Native American ancestry. Funerary objects and associated funerary objects are objects that, as part of the death rite or ceremony of a culture, are reasonably believed to have been placed intentionally at the time of death or later with or near individual human remains, or that were made exclusively for burial purposes or to contain human remains. Sacred objects are objects, specific ceremonial objects needed by traditional Native American religious leaders for the practice of traditional Native American religions. Objects of cultural patrimony. These objects have ongoing historical, traditional, or cultural importance that is central to the Native American group or culture itself, and therefore cannot be appropriated or conveyed by any individual, including members of the Native American group or Native Hawaiian organization. Such objects must have been considered inalienable by the Native American group at the time the object was separated from the group. The protection of Native American human remains, funerary objects, sacred objects, or objects of cultural patrimony on federal lands is the responsibility of all members of your agency. Such protection includes minimizing destruction, contamination, inadvertent disruption, or complicated custody transfer processes. Upon discovery or arrival upon a scene where it reasonably appears that a Native American grave, human remains, funerary objects, sacred objects, or objects of cultural patrimony are exposed or otherwise unsecured, members of your agency shall secure the site in the same manner as a crime scene. All activity at the scene other than scene preservation activity must cease. No photography or video recording may be permitted by the media or any group or individual who may wish to exhibit the remains. Without delay, the appropriate agency or group shall be notified to respond and take control of the scene. These include the following: federal land, appropriate agency at the U.S. Department of Interior or U.S. Department of Agriculture. State land, the appropriate medical examiner, the state archaeologist, and the state historic preservation officer, they within 15 days of when appropriate. Before releasing control of the scene, officers must confirm who will be making this notification. On tribal land, a responsible Indian tribal official is notified. On private land, of course, we notify the landowner and the chief medical examiner. If the location has been investigated as a possible homicide scene prior to the identification as NAGPRA site, investigators shall work with other appropriate agencies and individuals to ensure the appropriate transfer and repatriation of any material collected. Officers must ensure that any remains or artifacts located at the site are expeditiously processed. Now let's review some information briefly regarding the Oklahoma Emergency Alert System as it relates to today's topic. Now the Oklahoma Amber Alert Plan, otherwise known as the Amber Plan, was developed out of a desire to use maximum public participation to recover children in only the most serious child abduction situations through a coordinated effort of the use of media, law enforcement, technology, and the public. The Amber Plan is a cooperative agreement among the Office of the Governor, the Department of Public Safety, the Oklahoma Association of Broadcasters, and various law enforcement agencies in the state of Oklahoma. The Amber Plan is an early warning system available for use by law enforcement through OLETs to alert the public when a child has been abducted and law enforcement believe the child is in immediate danger. It's believed that the early warning system distributed by the state radio and television emergency alert system will coerce a child abductor into releasing a child for fear of being apprehended. There's legislation that passed in 2020 that created the Blue Alert Act for Oklahoma. The Department of Public Safety developed and implemented a statewide Blue Alert System. The statewide Blue Alert System was designed to rapidly disseminate useful information to statewide media outlets. An Oklahoma Blue Alert is activated only if all of the following conditions apply. A law enforcement officer has been killed or seriously injured, and the law enforcement agency investigating the incident has information identifying an individual as a suspect connected to the incident. The law enforcement agency that is investigating the suspect determines that the suspect poses a serious risk or threat to the public and other law enforcement personnel. The law enforcement agency investigating the subject has obtained either the name of the suspect, a detailed physical description of the suspect, or a description of the vehicle of the suspect with the vehicle registration plate numbers visible and registration plate numbers or letters. The law enforcement agency investigating the suspect recommends that the Department of Public Safety activate the blue alert. There was legislation that passed in 2009 which created the Silver Alert Act for Oklahoma. The Department of Public Safety developed and implemented a statewide Silver Alert system to be activated on behalf of a missing senior citizen in cooperation with the Department of Transportation, the Department of Human Services, and any local law enforcement agency, the Oklahoma Association of Broadcasters, and any other appropriate state or local agency. Although not yet passed into law, there is proposed legislation that would require DPS to develop and implement a statewide red alert system to be activated on behalf of a missing indigenous person in cooperation with the Department of Transportation, Department of Human Services, and any local law enforcement agency, the Oklahoma Association of Broadcasters, and any other appropriate state or local agencies. And finally, you see listed here a few resources that can aid in locating missing persons on the fly. OnStar, if the subject is in the vehicle and it is so equipped. Mobile device carrier through cell phone tracking. Credit or debit transactions. Inlets, OLETs offline. Offline TTY for other states, offline searches of other states TTY. Online searches, commercial online searches, some are pay for use, some are subscription or member use. Now, before we end the session, if you have any feedback on what you liked or disliked, or what you'd like to see discussed in a new class, or if you have a topic that you would like to present, please send me an email. I would love to hear from you. You see my email address there is kmccullough@omag.org, or you can call me at any time at 405-657-1408. Again, today's broadcast is a cooperative effort brought to you by the Oklahoma Municipal Assurance Group, the Oklahoma Association of Chiefs of Police, and the Oklahoma Municipal Management Services. You can learn more about OMAG, OACP, and OMMS by visiting our websites at omag.org, okchiefs.org, and okmms.org. Now, once your training coordinator or training officer submits a training roster to me at OMAG, I will transmit that information to CLEET and your training will be reported. We appreciate the time that you spent with us today. Please be safe, and I certainly look forward to our time together in the future.